Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Wise About Wildfire webinar hosted by the Utah Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. We're excited to have all of you with us today. I'm Taylor Mosman, a Wildland Urban Interface Specialist, or WUI. That's a term that we'll be using frequently, located in Central Utah, and our team will guide you through the webinar today and through the following weeks. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be put on the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands YouTube channel. If you do not wish to have your voice or image recorded, please do not speak and turn off your camera during the call. Please keep yourself muted for the duration of the presentation and submit any questions in the chat box. We will have opportunity to ask questions at the end. So to get us started today, please welcome Dan Cather.
How you doing? My name is Dan Cather, and thanks for inviting me to share some knowledge and some insight in what we're looking for as firefighters. My background, I'm a career firefighter paramedic for Provo Fire and Rescue. Been with Provo for 24 years. I'm also the wildland coordinator at the Utah Fire Rescue Academy. With that, I participate on the Great Basin Team 3, wildland incident management team. So I'm going to be presenting a couple different ideas to the group on what we're looking for on wildland fire, hence structures and the urban interface. As Taylor mentioned, if you have any questions, please send them to Taylor in the chat box, and she will, share them out. And if there's something that if I say something that's confusing, please bring that forward and allow us to, clarify that. So I want to start off with, ask yourself, would I feel comfortable or safe being at my house during a wildfire incident? When I say that, I want you to put yourself in a firefighter's position. If you've been asked to evacuate, we'd like you to evacuate. We're not asking you to stay. But if I was that firefighter and I was sitting on your front porch or at your house, would I feel safe or would I be comfortable? If you can answer yes on that, that's saying you're on the right track. You are working with the fuels in your house, along with some education on making sure that your house is in a condition where there's the potential for it to survive. One of the things that we bring out, people are like, if I follow the checklist, I do this, I do that, will my house always be safe? Nothing is 100%. I want everyone to remember that nothing is 100%. Doesn't matter how good of a house we build, how much kind of vegetation reduction we do. I cannot sit there and say, oh, 100% your house will be safe when we drive away. And we'll talk about that a little bit. If you answer no to that question, would I feel comfortable or safe here at my house? If you answer no to that, then ask yourself, what can I do? What can I do to change that situation? Remember, you being the firefighter. So what will change that situation? One of the hardest things that with this is having that decision process of saying, can I save this house? Can I not save this house? What can we do to get in there to protect that house or that structure? The first thing we're going to have to ask ourselves is when we talk about survival, we're talking about once evacuations are in place and there's no life safety there, so that means you're gone, is the survival of the firefighters. Can we get in there safely to do any mitigation or take any action with your property? That's where I ask myself, can I survive there? If I take an engine crew in there or I take resources in there, can we do it safely? With that, we have to look at the fire environment, and then we look at the access, and we look at construction and the clearance, and we look at time constraints, and then the stay or no go. And we'll come back and talk about each of those items here, throughout the talk. I want to share this video with you guys. I got to share my screen. I want you to look at this video, and I'm just going to bounce it through some different times on there. you can see where the fire started at the backside of those structures, and it's moved up the hill. You look at the vegetation, light flashy fuels, grass, sage. But you could see, if you look at the structures, yes, there's already structures involved. But what was the vulnerability? What was the vulnerability, or what was the critical point on them structures that allowed the fire to access those structures? Why were they able to ignite so readily? Those are the things that we have to look at. We have to look at the construction. We have to look at, where's that structure on the slope? What are the fuels? What are the adjacent fuels? Like I said, these are light, flashy fuels. So that means the fire is going to move very fast in the grass, in the sage. But you look at the structure, it's on a slope. What's overhanging? We're looking at a wood porch. Those are direct avenues for that fire to have access to that structure. And the reason I bring this up, this fire consumes 7 structures. We're only seeing the first couple minutes of this fire. The fire response took a little bit of time to get there. There was some other issues on the fire response side due to personnel and staffing of stations. I'm going to fast forward this to the 4-minute mark. You can see the fire still progresses. It's not a wildland fire. It's a wildland fire with structure fires. If you think about the wildland vegetation, that is the start. That's where it started from. But once we get into the structures, if a structure is within 50 feet of another structure, just the radiant heat alone will take it from structure to structure. Doesn't matter with wind, doesn't matter with the vegetation or slope. Once you get a structure burning, it will go structure to structure if it's within 50 feet of each other of radiant heat. So you can see where the fires progress through the wildland vegetation. That's your primary fire carrier. It's ignited the fires, but now once the structure is involved, you look how fast it's rapidly growing between the structures. Those are some things. That house to the far right, let me hit pause here for a second. This house right here, if you can see my mouse sort of moving, that house right there, that I'm going to call that the house that withstands time. So as you can tell, everything's moving to the left of the screen. And that house to the right looks like it's going to survive. Okay. I said it looks like it's going to survive. We're going to go to the 6-minute mark. At this time, there are now 5 structures that are fully involved. Sort of hard to see. You can see the house on the far right, it's still standing, or it's not involved. There's no fire on it yet. There's no direct flame impingement from the wildland fire itself, but it's the radiant heat. It's the accumulation of the radiant heat from the structure next to it that ignites that structure. And as you can see here at the 7-minute mark, now you can see on that far right-hand side of the screen, the chimney and that side wall is on fire. I wanted to show that and use that as the start for us to think about, where's our houses? Where are they located? We asked the firefighters, this is where I built my house. This is my dream house. This is where I want to be. But we always ask, we always think we're protected. We're going to have the firefighters. They'll get in here. They'll be able to stop this fire. I'm safe. Are we really safe? Let's talk about access. Getting up into your community or to where your summer cabin is, the properties that we need to protect. Is it easily identifiable? Is there an address? Can we make it up the roads? How big of a road or how big of a piece of equipment can we bring up that road? If we look at a structure engine, a type 1 structure engine, and we have a bridge across a little ravine, will that bridge hold that structure engine? If you start thinking about the weights of some of the engines, you could be looking at close to 60,000 pounds on those engines. I had lost my note here where I had it, but that's okay. You guys think about, will that bridge hold up? Can I get engines across? Smaller engines? Yeah. Can I get them in there? Heavy equipment. Think of the weight of a dozer. So think about access. With us trying to come in, what about egress? The community trying to leave. Can we get in there safely? Can the community get out of that area safely? One of the hardest things that we see as firefighters is for us trying to make access into a community and people trying to come out. There's been multiple times where we're trying to come in and all of a sudden we have an auto accident. I think one of your presenters talked about the campfire paradise. There was a section in that area, in that community, where there was an auto accident and it jammed up the roads. And so people had to leave on foot. And that also resulted in some deaths in that area. The campfire is one of those, I call it a biblical fire event. The conditions were just right. Everything aligned and the fire moved faster than anyone ever expected. Can we predict fire behavior? We can't. We look at the fire behavior. We look at the fuels. We look at the topography. We look at the winds, the elements that are added to the fire. There's times Mother Nature can throw that curveball and it will move faster than we have ever seen. We look at drought conditions. We look at areas where, like the fuels, we might have beetle kill. You got the pine bark beetle that has affected the fuels. Those all change the dynamics on how the fire is going to burn. So we're talking about access. So can we get into your structure? Do we have to go through those areas to get to your structure? Do we have a safe area to retreat to? I know I'm throwing some things out there, but I want to, walk us in there. So as that firefighter, I come pulling up at the bottom of the drainage. I look in there and I see 30 mailboxes sitting there, and I see one road going up. What's that telling me? Do I have 30 structures, 30 primary structures, or do I have 30 summer homes? If I see mailboxes, I'm going to assume they're going to be primary structures that I have up in there. And there might even be more. Are the driveways that are coming off, are they identifiable? Are there address markings? Are they visible? Some homeowners have, the ones that are visible where they're reflective, so the headlights hit them. Some don't have them. Some have very small. I'm getting old. My vision is getting worse, I think, with age and all that. And so the bigger the letters or the more you can have out there makes it easier for us to see. So where's your structure at? So look at your addresses. As that's still part of your access coming in. Do we have turnarounds? Do we have multiple switchbacks? If I get up to your property, is there an adequate place for me to turn around? Or is it so tight that I get one engine in there, and if I bring a secondary engine in, are we jammed up? Can we get turned around? How big of an area can we get into? So those are a couple things, just thinking about access. So where are you at? Where are you located on a hard pack road? Is it four-wheel drive? Is it paved? Look at, is it really narrow? Can we get multiple vehicles past? If we're trying to come in on a one-lane road and people are trying to come out, who's going to stop? Where's the closest turnaround? So, that's talking about the access, getting into your property. Once we get to your property, we need to start looking at the construction. As I said before, we got to talk about survival. Is it safe? Is it safe for me and my guys to go in there? So I'm going to assess that before we go in. Can we go in there? Yeah. All right. Let's think about the time. Where's the fire at? Where's the fire behavior? What's going to be the timing impact? If I can get into your structure and we have time, has mitigation been done? When I say mitigation been done, that's you as the homeowner. Have you done anything around your property to assist or to help us, the firefighters, to be able to have a better chance of saving and or making a less of an impact from that fire on your property? I hate sitting there saying, yeah, we can save your structure. It's 100%. No problem. Nothing's 100%. One of the biggest killers that we have on fires with structures is going to be embers. We talk about embers coming from the fire. We might not have no vegetation around our structure, but it could be those embers. What I like to think about is wintertime. when it's blowing the snow and you go out and you scrape your sidewalks and you clean out your driveway around your house, the doors, and you're like, man, that was great. Got it all done. And you come out 10, 15, 20 minutes later, maybe a couple hours later, and the wind's been blowing. And you get those snow berms and you see where it eddies all the snow in the corners, around the doors. That's where the embers are going to be. So I'd like to use that as the analogy is if a snowflake can land there, that's where the embers are going to land. If the wind can blow those snowflakes around, the wind's going to blow those embers around and deposit them in those locations. Okay, those are going to be the vulnerable spots on your structure. Excuse me 1 second here.
Does anybody have questions at the moment? You can feel free to use that raise your hand function. It's the little hand icon in the middle. At any moment, you can click that on and we can ask the question in the moment. So feel free to use that or the chat box.
Okay, so when we're talking about the structure, when we come in to look at your structure, hopefully this screen is being presented. You should be able to see.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. There's a lot of different agencies that have really good urban interface documentation. This one's out of Colorado, and I really like this one because it made it really simple. And I like the one thing, junk the juniper bushes. I call the little ornamental bushes in front of our houses that we like to plant. I call them the sparkler because it typically seems like on the 4th of July, and I'll just use my department as an example, we'll respond on a structure fire where someone has been using a sparkler and they get too close to the ornamental bushes, hence the little junipers, and they start those on fire with the sparkler right next to their house. I like this where they say junk the juniper bushes. They're kindling. They start very easy. So when we come in to look at your property, we look at, it's broken up to 3 zones, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, 0 to 5 feet from your structure. Okay, we've looked at your building construction, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But we want to look at the 0 to 5 foot from your structure. What kind of flammable vegetation do we have there? We talk about wood porches or the porches themselves. What do we store on the porch? What do we store under the porch? I've been guilty of it up at the cabins. That's where I store the firewood, is under that porch. I might not have screens in there. I might have other accumulation, yard accumulation in there. When I say yard accumulation, lawn furniture. We look at, your yard furniture or lawn furniture. A lot of that stuff is foam made out of hydrocarbons. One little ember on that, it's like putting gasoline on the fire. Look at your trees, the vegetation around your structure. You look at your pine straw, leaf litter, things that are going to come up to that 0 to 5 foot of your structure. So when you get those wind events and you get those embers that we talked about, where are those embers going to deposit? We talk about the roof. What kind of instructions, what is your roof material made out of? Are we still using wood shake roofs, or are we gone to composite materials, metal roofs? If we have a lot of pine trees, or we got a lot of squirrels in the area, squirrels like to take stuff and make nests in the eaves and the gutters. Have we cleaned those out? Are we pretty vigilant about cleaning those out? If we got an ember on the roof, is it going to get into that other vegetation or the other fuels that could start on fire, which will give us a longer impact of that fire on our roof and then finally encroach and get into the structure itself? So look at the 0 to 5 foot mark around the structure. Then we go to the zone 2, which is the 5 to 30 feet. So that's where we're talking about, mowing the grasses, heavy accumulations of fuels. Let's talk about our wood. We stack the wood up next to the house, or we get it close because we don't want to walk far to go get that wood. In the summertime, it might be the best practice is to take that wood stack and move it away from the structure, move it out and disperse it away from the structure. If we come in and we have to move that wood stack, that's what we're going to do, is we're going to move that wood stack and we're going to disperse it. And when we say disperse it, we're going to lay it, it's not going to be stacked back up. We're going to lay it out to where it's not compact. We don't have a big volume of fuel there. We're going to spread it out so it's laid over an area on that. There's a question. How do membrane roofs fare in fire compared to other roof types? Membranes can be very tough. If you maintain the membrane, sometimes you have the membranes and sometimes they'll put the tar rock on top of that membrane. Will work a little better. But the membranes themselves, if you have any kind of vegetation that's up there or a place for the embers to land onto, that's going to pose a risk. And once those membranes start on fire, it's still working like the the oil composites with that. I'm not super strong or knowledgeable about the membranes, like if the fire resistance on those. That might be something you'll have to look into. So that was a question that was presented about membranes on the structure. Hopefully that answered your question. If not, please ask again on that one. We talk about removing fuels. A lot of times people, people have the fear when we come in and say, hey, you know what, we need to reduce some of the vegetation. We need to remove some of the trees. They're like, oh my gosh, that's why I moved here. I like these trees. I want them really close to my, that's why I'm here. I want to be in the woods. We're not asking you to clear out your trees. What we're asking is for you to clean up your trees. So that might be limbing them up, removing the pine straw, the leaf litter, the duff, the organic matter that's underneath them. We might ask you to maybe thin out your trees, remove a few to where you don't have trees that are right next to each other. If you open up the canopies, it's going to do a couple things. It's going to make the tree healthier. It's going to draw in more sunlight. Second, it's going to allow the sun to get down to the surface fuels and allow those things to flourish also. And when I say surface fuels, maybe you have grass, you might have some natural vegetation in there that is fire resistive with that. So if you can thin out the trees or the brush, let's use oak brush or pinyon juniper, thinning those out. We're not saying remove them all, but we're asking you to thin them out. So if one of those trees do catch on fire, it doesn't radiate over to the next tree and start the next one on fire or radiate over to your structure. So we talked about structures, 50-foot minimum between structures. That might be your garage, your shop, your outbuilding to your structure. So 50 feet. If you start looking at trees and vegetation, we look at 20 feet. And that's with no wind, no topography, but 20 feet separation from the tops of the trees can have, if they're within 20 feet, it can go radiant heat and they can, start the next tree and the next tree. So that's where we're looking at is open those fuels up. We're not saying cut everything out. We're just saying, let's move some stuff out. We talk about ladder fuels. Ladder fuels are the fuels that's going to take it from the surface up to the tops of the trees to where it's more prone to the air and the wind with that. Then we go into zone 3. They talk about the 30 to 100 foot from the structure out to your property line. Cleaning that out. Opening things up. Looking at the different vegetation. I lost my mouse here. The different vegetation and everything. There's some books that are out there that you guys can access. The state has these, so you got Firewise Landscaping for Utah. Very good information in there of different types of fuels or plants, vegetation that you can plant for a Firewise landscape around your structure, especially if you're in the woods and everything. There's a lot of good information in that one there. There's also Utah Firewise Living. This will walk you through some of the stuff that we're talking about tonight, and also talk about some of the fuels and some of the plants that you can reintroduce around your structure. Let's see here. I got to get my mouse back over here. All right. So I think I'm done presenting on that piece there. Okay. So when we were talking about, the structure, earlier I said, that's one of the hardest things for us to do. If you've ever had to ride out a fire within your community where your structures are threatened, that's probably one of the most nerve-wracking things you can have. it's our livelihood. If we lose our home, what are we losing? We're losing everything. Did we have time? Did we have no time? If we don't have any time and that fire is right on our back door, are we ready to leave? And what are we going to take with us? With that, time is critical. That's one of the things we talk about. If we look at the fire, how fast is the fire moving? Where's it burning? What's going to be the impact as it's coming up to your community or to your structure? With that impact, are we able to get the citizens out? Okay, so number one, life safety. We want you out of there. At the time, you know what? They say we want to evacuate, but no, we're okay. It's just pre-notice. Are you taking that time, if it's a pre-notice for evacuation, are you taking that time to identify the things that you're going to take with you? And when we're saying the things you're going to take with you, we're talking like pets, legal documents, medications, things that you're going to need to be away from your structure for probably up to, we'll say a minimum 24 hours, but it could be an extended time, let's say a week. Are you able to leave that, leave your structure and be able to be self-sufficient? I'm having a moment there. With you leaving that structure, are we being proactive? If they sit there and they say, hey, we've been on a, let's see here, Dan, will you please describe how homeowners or community can create a safety zone? Okay. I'll come back to that one here in a second. I'll write that down here, safety zone. So if let's say you're put on a pre-evacuation notice, what can we do? Okay, we already talked about, getting the stuff that you're going to need for you and your animals to leave. But second, if there's time, harden your structure. So when I say harden your structure, lock things down. When I say lock things down, I'm asking shut your garage door, shut the doors on your structure, not lock them. And a lot of people have a fear with that. Oh, if I leave my structure unlocked, someone can get in there. The reason why we're asking you to leave, at least the front door unlocked or a back door unlocked is so us firefighters, if there was a situation happening and let's say something was burning on your structure, we can make access and take care of it without having to break a door down or anything to that effect. Leave a light on. There's a couple reasons why we want the light on. A, it tells me that the power is on. B, at nighttime, I can see your structure. I can find it, within the trees and where it's located. If the lights are on and all of a sudden the power's turned off, then I know the power's off, and that might be affecting the wells. Is your culinary system well driven? Is it on a gravity feed? So you might have a community tank where you have water and everything, a cistern, something to that effect. And so if us firefighters are going to try to utilize that water, is that going to be stopped if the power's turned off? So leave a light on. Harden your structure, walk around. If you have a ladder, take that ladder out and put that ladder in a place where it's accessible for us firefighters. We might have to maybe just get up on the eaves of your house and remove some vegetation. With that, make sure your windows are shut. Remove the debris. And then when they say, hey, it's time to leave, leave. That's one of the hardest things. If we come into an area and people haven't left the structure, that adds another element or another factor that we have to put into play. So now we have to deal with life safety even more. So not only are we trying to keep ourselves safe, now we have the public that's not leaving. There's times that we might be coming up that road and we do that quick assessment on that structure, looking at it, and it's like, there's nothing we can do with that structure. That might be a drive-by. A lot of people are like, well, you're going to just drive by my house? There's times that we do. We'll drive right past your structure because under the time, how fast that fire is moving, the location of that fire, the location of that structure, it might be the fuels around that structure, it might be the accumulation of that structure, or just the structure itself might not be viable for us to protect. We used to call it red rock, green rock. We'd go into communities and we'd put a red rock. That house was not savable. We'd put a green rock at this one. That one's savable. This goes back years. And people are like, oh my gosh, I got a red rock in front of my house. So they grab that red rock and they change it with their neighbor who's got a green rock. And then we come through and we're like, well, wait a minute, why is this a green rock? This one, it changes things up. So we don't do green rock, red rock anymore, but we do come through and we do identify the structures that we can save and the ones that we can't save. How do we do that? It's one of those things. It's probably one of the toughest decisions you'll ever make. I take out life safety. I know there's no life safety in that structure, so now they're gone. When I say they're gone, you've evacuated. Now I got to look at that structure as a fuel. I know people have a hard time with that, but can it burn? Yes. Will it burn? I hope not. And we'll do everything we can so it doesn't burn. But do we have time to be able to mitigate, eliminate the fuels around that structure, or is the structure a standalone where we can say, hey, that looks really good. It's got a good defensible space. There's good areas for us to be safe in. Come back to that question earlier. They talked about safety zones. An individual on the chat said safety zones. Some communities identified areas that's going to be a safe refuge. If there's a fire in XYZ part of that community, people are going to evacuate and go to this spot. It might be a park. It might be a big open field, but it's an area, a safe refuge for those homeowners to get into and be safe. And that fire will do its thing, but we know those people are safe. A true definition of safety zone is an area big enough. If I was going to come in as a firefighter, it's an area big enough for me and my crew to be able to withstand the current situation of that fire without having to deploy our fire shelter. We have the tinfoil tents, we call the fire shelters and stuff. So a safety zone for us is an area big enough for us and our crew to be able to survive without having to deploy our fire shelter. Doesn't mean that it's going to be comfortable. There's going to be smoke. There's going to be embers. It might be hot, but we're not going to get direct impact of that fire from the radiant heat on that. So communities, that's one of the things to think about. If you're in an area where you have a lot of homes and a lot of vegetation, you might have to identify an area where it might take some work, but an area where you're going to call that a safety zone. My mind just went blank on that one. But with that safety zone, big enough for you to get in the middle of. So it might be a couple acres. It might be a big park. The cars aren't going to be able to survive down in there. You got to get where the people are going to be. If the cars are on the outskirts and you have the cars down where the people are, that could be an impact. It could be a big parking lot. That could be a great safety zone. But you got to think about, it's not going to be the direct fire impact. It's going to be those embers. So what you bring in there with you, is it exposed to those embers, the smoke? I know a community here in Utah County where they've identified an area, and it's a big park area, but I want to say it's probably 5 or 6 acres, maybe even a little bigger than that. They identified as a safe area, and then they also cut in, some more access routes. At one time, it used to be one way in, one way out. Well, if we have a one way in, one way out, we're trying to come in, you're trying to come out. And so how do we get past each other to get in there to fight that fire? So do you have multiple egresses? Is there, if we're coming in on one road, are the citizens able to leave on another road? If we have a traffic accident at the main roundabout or the main intersection, is that going to jam everyone up? Or do they have a secondary route out? Hopefully that made sense on that. We start looking at the buildings, look at your construction, look at your clearance. We talked about that on the slide there, but look at the construction. What's the roof made out of? Is it wood shake? Is it composite? We talked about this a little bit. Look at your siding. And when you look at the siding, what's it made out of? And do we have direct fuels right up against that siding? Is it hardy board? Is it concrete? Concrete, is it brick? Is it stucco? What's the siding of your structure itself? Along with that, it's still part of the structure. Look at your porch. If you have a porch on your structure, is it wood? Is it treated? Is it dilapidated? We look at our eaves. Look at the eaves. Do we have trees right up against the eaves? Do we have screens in the gable ends to keep, A, animals out, but B, any blowing embers or any stuff that can go into the eaves and get into the attic space of our structure. Those are some of the things, that we have to look at. One of the things is the outbuildings. What's in that outbuilding? If I drove up to your structure, would I be able to sit there? Oh yeah, in that outbuilding, yeah, they got a lawnmower, they got this, we got that. We don't know, without having to go open that door. So what's in those outbuildings? Is it fertilizer? Do you have propane tanks? What's in there that could possibly cause hazards or cause a potential incident for us? If your house is on propane, one of the things we ask is before you leave on your evacuation is actually to go out and turn the propane off to your structure. That just helps mitigate or helps lessen the chance of having any further issues. I understand, once you turn the propane off, we're not really asking about the natural gas, but propane we are, just because we have the big tank that's sitting out back, hooked to your structure. Turn those off, secure them. If you have, maybe it's, some farmland or things like the gas tanks, have those identifiable, for us. If anything, there's mine just won't blink on this one, Taylor, but I want to say it's oh my gosh, the home assessment. What is it? 123
Survey 123.
Survey 123. Your local fire wardens and your local WUI coordinator, or the state coordinator, they can come out and help you with doing an assessment. That Survey 123 actually walks you through and identifies what you have around your structure, and it identifies things that you can improve upon and things that are good. So you got positive and negatives out of that. And it takes a little bit of time. It might take half hour, maybe up to an hour, depending on, the location and where you're at. But those are things that you guys can look into and access. We talk about time constraints. If it's going to take 10 hours of manpower to move all this stuff to reduce the vegetation around your structure, is that 10 hours is going to be immediate? And where I'm going with that is, if I show up with an engine of five, one engine, and I've got 5 people on an engine, it's going to take me 10 man hours to secure your structure. Is that 10 hours going to be viable to all the other structures that are around there? And when I say viable, I got to look at the timing of the fire. The fire's 2-3 hours out. I might not have time to do all that mitigation. And that's where the surveys, Survey 123, can assist on that. Once you guys have gone through that and worked on it, we come in, we might be able to finish some smaller tasks of cleaning things up and securing your structure. But if there's a lot of work, it's going to be one of those we might have to look at. It's like, you know what? We don't have the time. And then we move on. And it's tough. We sit there, and you might hear people talk about it or read about it, and they say, we will lose one structure to save many. And if we spend all this time on one structure to save it, we might lose many. And how do we draw that line? And that's where it comes into the triage, looking at those structures. There's no set formula on structure protection. We just have to set priorities, and we got to look at our timing. If it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of manpower to try to defend that structure, we might not be able to do that, and we might have to move on and protect the neighbors. When we talk about lots, you might have everything in your community, and let's say I'll use the example. Let's say there's 20 homes up in this drainage, and 19 of you have all agreed upon doing mitigation. But you have the one property in the middle that's like, nope, we're good. We're not going to do anything. Well, that one property, if you don't have buy-in with everyone, that one property could cause issues. And so that's where we talk about lot to lot ignitions. You might have the best plan in place, but if the neighboring lot hasn't done any mitigation and or fuel reduction, that can impact you. And then now you're being impacted from another source. And so, and I'm not saying, go out and strong arm your neighbor or anything to that effect, but we're talking about get together with your WUI coordinators. We're talking about getting together and identifying what are the hazards, what are the potentials, what are the risks, what can we do as a whole to make us all a better location or a better safe environment. What can we do to keep the firefighters safe when they come in? Are we expecting the firefighters? You call 911. That's our job. We're going to respond and try to fix what's going on. That's our job. We're going to do everything we can to fix that job. But there's a point when, and I'll keep going back. Life safety. Once life safety is out of that structure, it is considered a fuel, and then we have to look at the risk versus benefit. And when I say risk versus benefit, it's the risk to the firefighters. Can we do it? Can we go in there and do it safely without putting ourselves at risk, to where then if we're in trouble, we have to have another response to come in and try to save us? And I hope that makes sense. So we look at time constraints. The timing of the fire. How far out is that fire? How fast is that fire moving? Do I have time to work on one structure, or do I have time to work on many structures? Can I defend them? Do I have a safe area to pull back to? Do I have a safe area to pull my whole crew back to? If the fire is moving, and we'll use the campfire as the example, Paradise there in California, that fire moved so quickly. People are, where do we, put the people? Where do we keep them safe? The fire response wasn't even able to get there quick enough because just the size of the fire. There's times there's nothing we can do. All we can do is life safety. There was some of the fires there in Colorado where it just went from structure to structure to structure. Why did this one structure survive? This structure didn't. It's one of those ones. I drive home on the freeway. Did I get in the accident? Why did I not get in the accident? And that car did. It's all chance. There's no set formula on why did this structure survive and this structure burn. This structure looked like, oh my gosh, this structure's going to withstand time. And then you turn around and it catches fire. And I say that as I've been on incidents where we've had the best game plan. We've got, we stopped the fire out in front of us. We stopped the impact on the structures. None of the structures are burning. 10, 15, 20 minutes later, we turn around and we have structures that are burning back behind us in the city. What caused that? I failed to recognize the embers. And I talked about that earlier. The embers are the source of killers on a structure. So if we can reduce the vulnerability of our structure or the fuels around our structures from that ember impact, that's going to do a lot for us. And so relate that back to the snow. If the snow is going to blow the snow into that corner or the snowflake into that corner, that's where those embers are going to go. If it's going to blow and drift across the road, that's where those embers are going to go. So we might have the best stand out in front, but what's happening behind us? And that's where we were talking about, that's where I mentioned the lots. The lot, your neighboring lot and your lot. Are they safe? If the fire starts on this one lot, will it stay on that lot? Or is it going to impact the other lots? With that, your stay or no go. When we look at the structures, we break the structures down into a couple categories. Defensible, prep and hold, defensible, standalone. Okay, so a defensible standalone, that's where the community or the public has taken action and they've made their property safe. We feel under the conditions that that structure will be able to survive and stand alone without any mitigation. And then we go to defensible, prep and hold. That's where, yes, the public has done some mitigation, and under the conditions, we might have to go do a little extra prep, but we feel that it will hold under this foreseen conditions. Then we go into non-defendable. You got non-defendable prep and leave and non-defendable rescue drive-by. When we talk about non-defendable prep and leave, the community or the public has taken action. They've mitigated fuels, they've mitigated their property, but due to the fire behavior, we don't feel safe being in there. So we might come in, do a quick prep, but then we're going to leave, come back, go back to our safety zone, and then come back in after the fire front moves through. There's been a lot of times we've saved structures after the fire front's gone through, coming back, and it's just, there are very small little ember pockets on places that are starting to burn, and so we've been able to save the structures that way. Then you look at the non-defensible rescue drive-by. That's where we come pulling up, and due to the construction, the structure, The structure itself, the condition of that structure. We look at maybe the roof's on fire, maybe there's so much vegetation up against the structure, or we go back to that video I showed you. The structure's already involved. We'll do a rescue drive-by. That's where we come in, make sure there's no life inside that structure, and then we pull back out. We might have to let in, like in that video, that was on top of a hill, but it was a whole community up in there, and they saved the rest of the community, but 7 structures were impacted. They had to make a stand somewhere. And so you got to look at about the manpower, access, water. We might have to let a couple structures burn if they're already involved and save the many. And those are some of the hardest things, some of the hardest decisions that people are going to have to make on that. So start thinking about, non-defensible rescue drive-by with that. And then you look at the rapid mitigation measures. We might have time to get in there and do some quick stuff. And that's where we're talking about the prep and leave, removing the small combustibles immediately next to the structure. Maybe it's that wood pile. Maybe it could be a vehicle. What's there? Make sure the windows and doors are closed, including the garage. Leave them unlocked. Clean the air around the fuel tanks. Shut off the fuel tanks and your propane. So those are just things. As that fire impact comes in, we look at the fire behavior. We look at the timing. What's the impact? Can I get into that community and get back out to a safe area before the fire impact? There's times, we can come pulling up into those areas, and it might be an hour drive in there. And if the fire is 2 hours out, we're not going to have time to get all the way in there. And do we have a safe area? Am I going to get trapped between my safety zone and trying to get to the structures? Am I going to get caught on a mid-slope road? Or we're going to get in there and we find that the bridge has been compromised, or we don't have a turnaround? So those are things, to ask yourself. If you're the firefighter, would you feel safe and comfortable at your location or at that structure? We're not asking you to stay at your structure. I just want you to, put that fire hat on and say, yeah, I'm a firefighter. Do I feel safe here? Can I be safe here? I hope that answered a few questions with that. And there's a lot of other information that's out there. I'm going to share my screen with you guys one more time here. Share. Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. Do that share. There we go. Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. They've got resources there for you. A lot of great information here. You can get in there. It's got education materials. They talk about the NFPA Firewise. There's a lot of good information in there to come back on. And then from there, you can still reach out to your county fire warden, your fire department, your WUI coordinator, and they can assist you on that. And then you come in here. This is the new wildfire risk assessment data portal that you can go into. And if you're worried about your area, you can type in your address, assess your risk, and then it will zoom into that area. It talks about the tools, the fire tracker, the values that are there. So there's all sorts of tools that are out there, and the state of Utah has put a lot of effort and work into this because we see the need. When I say the need, we see that there's a lot of areas within the state that we have potential for catastrophic loss of structures with the potential of catastrophic loss of life. And that's what we're trying to eliminate. Nothing's ever going to be 100%, but we want to eliminate the catastrophic category of it and reduce that risk. And I think, with Taylor and the other folks that she works with, putting on these series of events, these series of discussions and everything, I'm hoping that we're answering some questions and giving everyone a chance or an avenue to assess and to look at what they have and be able to have an educated guess or an educated response to, what am I looking at here on my property? Can we be safe? Can I mitigate the impact of the fire on my residents? can I, eliminate the impact if the fire, starts on my property? Can I reduce the risk to my neighbors? Can I reduce the risk to my community? Can we do it safely?
You covered a lot of great points. Thank you, Dan. That was great information. I might just add in there that wildfire is a very unique natural disaster, and there is that false sense of security that a firefighter crew is going to come in and save my home, and they're going to be there to put the fire out. But as you shared that video at the beginning, I think it was 6 minutes before resources were even on scene. And in that time, you had already lost about 4 structures. And I mean, looking at the typical fire seasons we're having now, resources are being depleted very, very early in the season, and they're not as available anymore. And so we can't depend on them to always be there to come in and put the fire out.
And that's one of the things, you're saying there, Taylor, is very accurate. Is fire season, we used to call it a fire season. I think we need to change that analogy from fire season to fire years, because it seems like no matter where we're at, there's always somewhere burning, and the resources are going all over. We got this great snowpack this year. We got a lot of water. We got a lot of runoff. Areas that have been impacted by the fire may be impacted by mudslides and debris flows. And we start looking at our resources. We might be out of the state fighting fires in other communities, working with them because that's where the need is. And then all of a sudden we have the firefighter, the fire's here. You can't predict a fire season. I know we got agencies, predictive services. They do their best. We can say, hey, it looks like it's going to be a busy year. We can say, no, it's not going to be a busy year. Fighting fire, in my opinion, sometimes is like flipping a quarter. Can we make it stand? Can we not make it stand? Is it going to be good? When I say a good year of firefighting is when things are not burning. And a bad year is when we got things that are, catastrophically burning. Is there any other questions out there or anything I can clarify?
I dropped those links in the chat box that Dan shared for the URAP, or the Wildfire Risk Assessment Portal. And then Forestry, Fire, and State Lands website is in there as well. So you can find those resources he shared. Feel free to ask questions while we've got Dan here, if you've got any. I think you made a really great point too, Dan, with pointing out that you can't always 100% eliminate that risk. You can have the best defensible space done on your structure. You can harden the structure as much as possible, but given some of the conditions that fires are burning in, there might not be anything you can do to protect the structure.
Yeah, and it's one of the toughest things a firefighter will go through, and an individual will go through, losing your structure. And it's hard. And it's one of those things, if we can eliminate the life safety in that structure, it makes our job a little bit easier. But if we can eliminate or at least reduce the impact, it makes our jobs that much easier. Then we can focus on the fire and not lose people's livelihoods and their homes and the memories and everything else. And then the catastrophic end of that would be if we lost life.
Definitely. And I think when values are at risk, when resources and communities are at risk, it puts people in a natural, human behavior, you're going to unconsciously take more risk if it means protecting a structure.
I'm just reading some of the notes that people are putting out and everything. And no, you guys are all welcome with that, Yeah, perspective, my perspective as a firefighter is going to be different from another firefighter. And then our perspectives are going to be totally different than the homeowner, and our perspectives are going to still be totally different than the community. And that's one of the things in the comments was, you're right. There's different perspectives with that. And then I live in a Box Canyon, Covered Bridge Canyon. How should we plan in that we only have one entry point? So Covered Bridge is one of those, I call that one of my nightmares, because I live over the hill from you in Salem, and that's been one of the scariest areas. If fire got involved in that area, you're right. You guys have one way in, one way out. The second part of that would be, we go back to the Bald Mountain and the, I guess you're think the Bald Mountain and the Pole Canyon fire, where they came across Birdseye. He came on the backside of Covered Bridge. That there for you guys to plan with the one entry point, that one there is going to have to be, the whole community is going to need to come together on what kind of WUI action you guys are going to take while, the urban interface. Are you looking at the fuel reductions? And I know you guys do fuel reductions in there. How can you guys make your community safer? Because you have a one way in, one way out. You're in a box canyon, a lot of vegetation. I don't even know how to really answer that one. It's scary because, box canyon, us firefighters fear box canyons because it's a one way in, one way out. It's like forced convection. The fire starts at the bottom, it's going to race to the top. You look at the fuel loading, what kind of fuel's in there. So, you look at fuel modifications, you look at your building codes. With the building codes, look at hopefully in there you have, no wood shake roofs. You guys implement, some interface codes to where if there is a fire, that community will have a less of an impact if there's a fire, and we will not require a lot of firefighting effort to prep around your structures, but they can focus on fighting the fire. And I hope that answers that question. And if not, you could reach out to Taylor and she can share my information with you, and we can get you with the right person to get you the answers in there. Utah County Fire and that. And then another question was, what is the best way to let firefighters know a structure or a property has been fire hardened and should be more safe? Firewise sign on the address sign, or do you just have to assess? If you put out there, Firewise, some communities are Firewise communities, and so we know the preps have been done. But if you put something out there by your address saying, hey, we've done this, it could even be a poster board and say, we did this, and write on there what we did. We'll still drive in real quick just so we know what the structure looks like and what we have. And just a quick drive in there. Yep, this looks great. And then we'll bounce back out. Nothing's ever 100%, but with what you guys do will help us and eliminate the time that we have to put in to get in there and to assess it.
I might add on to that too. So we talked about the value of data and how crucial it is, and how time is always going to be a driving factor to being able to suppress that fire. So to answer, I think this kind of works for both questions. If we can be involved in developing a community wildfire preparedness plan, we can help to identify some of those hazards that might be there, like the access, if it is only a one way in, one way out, or if you have some bridges that will not hold the weight of a fire engine coming in there. So planning ahead of time might help to give that information to the fire crews so that they won't have to, they'll know it ahead of time, basically, and just save you a little bit of research. Good questions. I'll throw out there too. So we had the Wood Hollow back in 2012, and some of the lessons learned, some of the big ones that we really learned from that was the value of data, and then having an opportunity to work with an incident management team and being prepared with the evacuations and knowing about the Ready, Set, Go, the Firewise programs. even having a community wildfire council in place, that's all going to help with creation of a CWPP and having those plans pre-identified. And then just having an emergency plan ready to cut that time in half. So in the event you aren't scrambling, it's not as chaotic, and you know what you need to do beforehand. Looks like there's some comments. So I'll send out contact information in an email.
And one of the things I just want to end with for my behalf would be your fire warden. Your county fire warden is a great asset to assist on the areas, and they have the direct contact with their WUI coordinator along with the state WUI coordinator. And so those are some of the avenues for you to start with, is that fire warden. And that fire warden works closely with the fire departments and the fire districts. Those would be the ones, if you called me and you said, this is my area, so I'll use Covered Bridge as the example. I'll have the county fire warden, make contact with, Covered Bridge. So, the area you're in, that local or that county fire warden is one of your best assets to talk to. And then you also have the BLM and the Forest Service. They have WUI coordinators also, and they work really close with the state WUI coordinators. And so there's a lot of avenues out there and a lot of people you can get together with to get answers and some help.
This other link that I just posted in the chat box is a list of all of the contact information to the Forestry, Fire, and State Land staff. You can find your specific county, and there will be the local WUI coordinator, fire wardens, foresters, all of the specialists that are local to your area, and will have that direct information. So check that out. And if you need anything else from me, just let me know. Looks like Carl put the survey link in the chat box, so feel free to fill that out and give us some feedback on what we can improve on, or if there's certain topics that you would like to see us cover in the next session that we do. We want to make this as usable for all of you as we possibly can, so let us know what you're looking for. And if you guys don't have any more questions, I think we might be good to wrap up for the night. Thank you guys for taking time out of your day and joining tonight to learn about how we can be more effective and fight fire safely in the WUI community, and learn some things on what we can do as individuals and as communities and bring everybody together. So thank you guys. And a huge thanks to Dan for taking his time and sharing his knowledge and expertise with us. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And thanks for the opportunity.
Don't forget, we've got our last webinar on May 3rd. It's going to be fire adapted communities, and that will be the last one for this spring session. So I hope to see you guys all there. Thank you guys. Have a great night.